The cosmos trembled quietly as the heavens of Olympus shifted in anticipation. From the union of Zeus, ruler of gods, and Hera, queen of the divine pantheon, a pulse emerged, one of fire, tension, and latent force. Ares was born, not with a cry or a wail, but with a heartbeat that echoed across marble halls, through silver light, and into the very fabric of existence. Every breath he drew carried with it the rhythm of conflict yet to come, a motion entwined with consequence, a pattern that would ripple across gods and mortals alike. Even as an infant, Ares radiated the energy of battle. His tiny hands, though fragile, carried the awareness of movement and timing. Shadows seemed to bend subtly around him, while sunlight glimmered in sharp angles upon his form. Though silent, he was not passive. The currents of courage, tension, and latent fury swirled through him like a river, shaping an understanding beyond the mere grasp of mortals or gods. The gods of Olympus watched quietly. Zeus, father and king, felt the surge of power in his son, knowing that the presence he had sired would one day challenge not only mortals, but the balance of gods themselves. Hera, mother and queen, sensed the volatile brilliance, the duality of destruction and guidance entwined within the newborn. Other deities felt faint vibrations across the heavens. Athena, quiet and calculating, observed. Apollo, radiant and precise, felt anticipation. Hermes, fleet and cunning, noted the sparks of instinct ready to awaken. Outside Olympus, the natural world stirred in subtle recognition. The wind carried whispers of unseen change. Rivers mirrored currents of motion that had not yet been walked. Forests seemed to shift, leaves tilting with the pulse of the newborn god. The world, both mortal and divine, awaited the shaping of a force that would embody war, courage, instinct, and transformation. Even before his first steps, Ares' awareness stretched beyond himself. He sensed the pattern of motion in all things, the sway of trees, the pull of tides, the momentum of creatures moving across the earth. He felt the faint tension of mortal hearts, the cadence of their struggle, the rhythm of courage and fear intertwined in every decision. Though he had yet to engage in battle, the essence of combat, of motion and consequence, had already become a part of his being. And so, in the quiet of the halls of Olympus, amid marble and silver, light and shadow, the god of war took his first breath, not merely as a child but as a presence, a pulse, a rhythm waiting to unfold across the cosmos. His story had begun, slowly, deliberately, like the first tremor of an earthquake yet to be felt across all lands and hearts. Days and nights unfolded like a river of gold and silver across Olympus, each carrying subtle vibrations that reached even the newborn god. Ares moved with a precision and rhythm that seemed innate, as though the currents of motion and consequence flowed through him before he could even comprehend them. Each footstep on the polished marble, each stretch of his limbs, resonated with a pulse older than the mountains, older than the rivers, a rhythm that whispered of battles, strategy, and instinct. The winds themselves seemed to bend around his presence, curling through the columns of Olympus halls, carrying echoes of the nascent god's energy into forests and rivers far below. Trees leaned subtly as he passed, leaves tracing patterns that mirrored the pulse within him. The sunlight itself fractured against the angles of the palace, shimmering with a tension that acknowledged the arrival of a being whose purpose was motion, mastery, and the unfolding of conflict. From the earliest days he tested his own limits. Rocks shifted beneath his grasp, wind currents tugged playfully at his balance, shadows stretched and contracted in response to his movements. It was as if the world itself provided a training ground, an unseen tutor guiding him toward the rhythm of combat and strategy. Zeus watched, silent and commanding, sensing the latent power that would one day challenge both gods and mortals. Hera observed the intensity, the fire within him that demanded guidance yet defied restraint. Even as a child, Ares' awareness extended beyond immediate surroundings. He felt the pulse of the mortal realm, subtle currents of tension, courage, and fear flowing across distant fields and forests. He sensed the approach of predators, the subtle shifts in wind that presaged motion, the cadence of life and death intertwined in the world below. Though he did not act, he absorbed these currents as lessons, integrating instinct, perception, and rhythm into the very core of his being. The first divine trials began quietly. Athena sent waves of strategy, patterns of thought that he could perceive without understanding fully. Apollo's radiant light and precision forced him to align instinct with awareness. Hermes tested speed and adaptability, weaving unseen currents through the air. Each subtle interaction honed his pulse, training him in the invisible art of war. Movement harmonized with consequence, instinct guided by perception, strength tempered by rhythm. By the time he could walk among the corridors of Olympus, Ares' presence had already begun to shape the world around him. Shadows responded to his steps, rivers whispered in subtle patterns, and even mortal hearts far below quickened as if sensing the growing pulse of war incarnate. He did not yet wield weapons, nor did he step onto battlefields, but his understanding of motion, timing, and presence had matured beyond his years. And so, as the sun traced arcs across the heavens and silver light reflected from marble pillars, Ares began to awaken fully to himself. He was no longer merely a child of gods, but the embodiment of a force that would sweep through mortal lands and divine realms alike. The rhythms of war, courage, instinct, and consequence flowed through him, shaping the god he would become. His legend, slow to unfold but inevitable in its pulse, had begun to resonate across the cosmos. The pulse of Olympus shifted as Ares grew, his presence now palpable across marble halls and sunlit meadows alike. Every step he took resonated through stone, air, and river. Even the winds seemed to bend around him, carrying whispers of potential, currents of motion, and the first stirrings of conflict. His body moved with innate precision, every limb, every heartbeat a reflection of forces he had yet to fully understand. Instinct intertwined with awareness, and with each passing moment, he became a living rhythm within the cosmos itself. Athena observed closely, sending currents of strategic thought and challenge through the spaces around him. She tested him not with direct confrontation, but with lessons of timing, anticipation, and perception. Apollo's light shimmered across corridors, splitting into infinite patterns that required the young god to harmonize his motion with unseen forces. Hermes darted in and out of shadows, weaving challenges of speed and adaptability. These divine currents pushed Ares beyond mere instinct, forcing him to integrate perception, timing, and presence into a single coherent pulse. Even the mortal realm could not escape his influence. The first stirrings of human conflict seemed to align subtly with his growing awareness. Soldiers on distant fields felt courage surge inexplicably in moments of desperation. Leaders found insight they could not explain. Instincts guided the hands of the untrained into moments of perfect timing. Ares sensed these currents, absorbing the pulse of mortal struggle and folding it into his understanding of war. Each clash of weapons, each breath of fear, each heartbeat of resolve became part of a larger pattern, a rhythm he could perceive but not yet fully wield. The first true trials of combat arrived in subtle forms. Creatures sent by the whims of gods, movements of wind and shadow that threatened to unsettle him, currents of light and perception that demanded adaptation. Ares responded without thought, guided by the pulse that had been growing within him since birth. Motion and stillness, instinct and awareness, energy and calm flowed together. Each test refined him, teaching that war was not simply about strength, but about rhythm, presence, and understanding the flow of consequence. By the evening, as the sun cast long shadows across the marble floors and golden meadows, Ares stood alone atop a ridge. The wind moved gently through his hair, rivers murmured below, and the pulse of mortal and divine currents intertwined around him. He was no longer simply a god born of war. He had become a presence, a rhythm, a force whose awareness of conflict and motion extended across the heavens and the earth. Even in silence, he understood the inevitability of the future. The battles he would face, the wars he would guide, the mortal hearts he would touch, and the legends that would emerge. The god of war had begun to awaken fully, not in fury or destruction, but in rhythm, instinct, and awareness. His legend, patient, deliberate, and unstoppable, had begun to echo through all realms. The mortal world began to stir under the subtle pulse of the god of war. Fields of battle, still distant and unaware, carried currents of tension, courage, and fear that Ares could perceive. His presence, though invisible, intertwined with their motions, guiding instinct, shaping decisions, and harmonizing chaos with rhythm. Soldiers fought with intuition beyond reason, arrows found targets with uncanny precision, and leaders acted decisively, unaware of the divine pulse guiding them. Ares did not move among them as a conqueror, nor did he impose his will with aggression. Instead, he allowed himself to merge with the currents of motion, blending instinct with awareness, fury with mastery, chaos with consequence. Every clash of weapons, every rally of courage, every retreat and advance became part of a greater pattern that he sensed and refined. The first mortal wars tested not only strength, but timing, perception, and resilience. Ares observed the flow of human conflict, feeling the rhythm of each heart, the cadence of each movement, the subtle interplay between courage and hesitation. He absorbed it all, integrating these lessons into his understanding of war as a force not only of destruction, but of transformation. At the same time, the gods watched and tested him further. Athena challenged him with strategy, shaping patterns of movement that demanded foresight and adaptation. Apollo's light fractured across battlefields, forcing him to perceive and anticipate paths of motion he had not yet mastered. Hermes darted along hidden currents, introducing speed and unpredictability that honed his reflexes and perception. Through each trial, the god of war learned to harmonize instinct, awareness, and consequence into a single flowing rhythm. Even the environment seemed to acknowledge him. Rivers adjusted subtly, flowing in patterns that mirrored the motion of armies. The wind carried currents that aligned with the pulse of his presence. The earth beneath feet seemed to rise and fall in sync with the tempo of conflict. The mortal and divine worlds together became a living classroom, teaching Ares the intricate balance of motion, timing, and consequence. By twilight, as the sun painted the horizon in crimson and gold, Ares stood atop a ridge overlooking the mortal battlefield. His pulse resonated through the rivers, the wind, and the hearts of those engaged below. He was no longer merely a child of Olympus, nor simply a god learning his nature. He had become the embodiment of war itself. Rhythm, instinct, courage, and consequence intertwined into a force both visible and invisible, shaping legend even before he fully stepped into it. The winds whispered, the rivers murmured, and the battlefield below echoed with the subtle recognition of a god whose presence would forever alter the course of mortal and divine struggles. Ares' journey had only just begun, yet the rhythm of his legend had already begun to pulse through all realms, waiting for the first true eruption of conflict to shape him fully. The horizon trembled with the first true convergence of gods, mortals, and forces beyond mortal comprehension. Ares moved within the currents of battle, unseen but unmistakable, a presence that resonated through warriors, shaping instinct, courage, and motion. Every clash of swords, every charge, every footfall became part of a living rhythm, a pulse of motion and consequence flowing through mortal and divine alike. The first large-scale battle began as Titan forces, ancient and immense, stirred against mortals and gods. Their power distorted the land and sky, yet Ares' presence harmonized every motion. He did not strike with unchecked fury, instead he guided instinct and awareness, amplifying courage where fear should dominate, aligning strategy with opportunity. The battlefield itself became a living extension of his rhythm, every ripple of motion a note in the symphony of war. Athena observed from above, sending currents of strategy and calculation to test him. Apollo's beams fractured across the battlefield, revealing hidden dangers, forcing him to harmonize instinct with perception. Hermes darted unpredictably through chaos, threading layers of speed and agility that demanded precise timing. Each divine challenge refined him further, shaping a god not merely of strength, but of rhythm, awareness, and mastery. Mortals felt the pulse of his presence most profoundly. Soldiers acted with clarity beyond reason, leaders made instantaneous decisions that shaped the tide of conflict, and courage surged like a current through the ranks. The battlefield became both challenge and teacher. Ares learned to harmonize not only his own motion but the motion of all who shared it, weaving instinct, awareness, and consequence into a single living flow. Even the land responded. Rivers twisted subtly in alignment with motion, winds carried the cadence of action, and earth itself rose and fell with the rhythm of combat. Titan's assaults were absorbed, redirected, and transformed into lessons of timing and balance. Chaos was not destroyed, it was harmonized. Each strike and parry became part of an unfolding melody, a rhythm only a god of war could perceive and command. As the sun dipped low, casting crimson light across the battlefield, Ares paused atop a ridge. He breathed deeply, feeling the pulse of mortal courage, divine motion, and Titan strength interwoven into a single cadence. Every movement, every breath, every heartbeat resonated with the rhythm of war itself. He had transcended the role of a mere combatant. He had become the living embodiment of conflict. Instinct fused with awareness, fury tempered with mastery, chaos aligned with consequence. The fires of battle burned across the lands, yet within them flowed the rhythm of Ares. Mortals, gods, and titans alike moved to an unseen pulse, the eternal cadence of courage, motion, and presence. The god of war had forged his legend, shaping the cosmos with each subtle influence, and the world had begun to feel the weight and inevitability of his eternal rhythm. The heavens themselves seemed to tremble as the pulse of Ares expanded, touching both mortal and divine realms. Armies clashed in valleys and plains far below Olympus, yet each motion, each strike, each surge of courage or hesitation carried his unseen rhythm. He did not need to step forward to be felt. The cadence of war flowed through every being present. The battlefield became more than a place of conflict. It became a living symphony, every motion, every heartbeat, every breath forming a note in the eternal song of struggle and mastery. The Titans, immense and unyielding, moved to disrupt the flow, yet Ares harmonized their assaults with the currents of motion already present. Mortals reacted instinctively, guided by the subtle influence of a god whose understanding extended beyond brute strength. Leaders made impossible decisions with clarity, soldiers moved with uncanny precision, and the battlefield itself seemed to breathe in accordance with the pulse he carried. Athena's strategies tested him at every turn, shifting formations, predicting motion, and challenging instinct. Apollo's radiant light fractured across the plains, demanding foresight and perception. Hermes moved unpredictably, threading the chaos with swiftness and cunning. Each test forced Ares to integrate instinct, awareness, and consequence into a single harmonious pulse. Every duel, every counter, every subtle adjustment became a meditation in motion and presence. The rivers and winds of the mortal realm responded as if alive. Currents of water shifted in alignment with battles. Gusts of air carried the cadence of motion. Even the ground rose and fell with the tempo of clash and retreat. Titans found their overwhelming assaults tempered, their force folded into rhythm rather than resisted. Chaos became a teaching instrument, every strike a lesson, every defense a note in a pattern too complex for mortals or gods to discern fully. By nightfall, the battlefield glimmered under the silver light of Olympus. Shadows stretched across shattered earth, rivers whispered through the valleys, and the pulse of Ares extended through every living being present. He stood metaphorically at the center of the storm, the god of war not merely in body but in rhythm, awareness, and presence. Mortals would later speak of courage beyond reason, intuition beyond explanation, and victories that seemed guided by fate itself, the silent signature of a god whose mastery transcended all realms. Ares' legend had begun to solidify. He was no longer simply the god of war by birth. He was the living embodiment of its eternal cadence. Motion, consequence, instinct, and awareness had fused into a rhythm that shaped mortal and divine conflict alike. The world, from Olympus to the farthest battlefields, would never be the same, for the pulse of Ares now flowed through the heart of every conflict, visible only to those attuned to the eternal rhythm. And so, as the stars emerged and night embraced the land, Ares' presence remained unbroken. His journey was just beginning, but the fires of conflict had already forged him into legend, and the cadence of his pulse would echo across the cosmos for all eternity. The battlefield stretched beyond mortal sight, a living tapestry of clash and motion, chaos and rhythm. Ares moved through it as a pulse, unseen yet undeniable, every heartbeat, every breath, every motion flowing through the currents of both mortal and divine forces. Armies surged, titans shifted, gods tested. Yet every element aligned subtly with the rhythm he carried. His presence was not of dominance but of orchestration. Instinct, awareness, and consequence woven into a pattern that resonated through all who fought. The Titans, massive and ancient, unleashed power meant to unmake the battlefield. Yet each strike and motion was folded into Ares' rhythm, redirected with precision, harmonized into a pulse that amplified courage and aligned action. Mortals moved with uncanny intuition, guided by the invisible flow of a god who understood the cadence of war in every detail. Leaders acted decisively in moments that should have been confusion. Soldiers moved with instinctive perfection, and even the winds and rivers responded to the force of his presence. Athena pressed her tests of strategy and foresight, shifting currents and formations, demanding balance and anticipation. Apollo's beams fractured reality with precision, forcing Ares to perceive not only physical movement but the rhythm of intention itself. Hermes' speed and unpredictability introduced layers of motion that required near-perfect synchronization. Each challenge strengthened him, weaving instinct, perception, and consequence into an unbroken rhythm. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, the battlefield shimmered in gold and silver. Smoke curled in slow spirals, rivers glimmered with the reflection of battle, and shadows stretched in acknowledgement of a pulse that guided all. Ares stood metaphorically at the center, a god of war fully awake. His mastery was no longer theoretical. It had manifested in motion, in consequence, in courage, and in the orchestration of every element of battle. In that moment, chaos became harmony, fury became rhythm, and the battlefield itself became a living extension of the god's pulse. Titans faltered, mortals surged, and gods flowed in alignment. Every clash of steel, every footfall, every exhalation of breath became part of a larger symphony conducted by the eternal rhythm of Ares. By nightfall, as the battlefield settled into calm, the pulse of war continued, silent yet present. Ares had transcended his beginnings. He was no longer merely the god born of war, but the eternal embodiment of its rhythm. Motion, courage, instinct, and consequence converged in him. His legend had begun in full, unbroken, and destined to ripple through mortals, gods, and titans alike for all eternity. The fires of conflict burned on in memory and echo, and the god of war remained, eternal, unyielding, and complete in the cadence of his being. The world beyond Olympus trembled under currents of motion that few could perceive. Fields of mortals, kingdoms of men, and stretches of untamed wilderness became stages for the unfolding presence of Ares. He moved unseen, yet his pulse touched all living hearts, guiding instinct, amplifying courage, and harmonizing chaos into rhythm. Every clash of swords, every charge of cavalry, every arrow loosed into the sky reverberated with the god's silent cadence. The first prolonged campaigns began in valleys and plains distant from Olympus. Mortal armies clashed with instinctive courage, unaware of the divine currents influencing them. Leaders acted with clarity beyond reason, soldiers moved with uncanny timing, and every battlefield motion followed a rhythm that no human eye could comprehend. Ares did not impose force. He merged with the currents of motion, becoming the pulse that guided not just battle, but the flow of consequence itself. Above, the gods watched and tested him further. Athena sent waves of strategy through the battlefield, challenging him to harmonize instinct with perception. Apollo's light fractured across the terrain, revealing hidden dangers, forcing him to align motion with foresight. Hermes moved along unseen currents, threading unpredictability through the field, compelling him to adjust with seamless precision. Each divine trial sharpened his mastery, weaving awareness, motion, and consequence into a single coherent rhythm. The Titans, ancient and massive, sensed the surge of his presence and stirred at the edges of the conflict. Their assaults threatened to unmake both mortal and divine order, yet Ares folded their power into the rhythm of battle. Chaos became a medium, every strike, every parry, every motion transformed into part of a living pattern. Mortal courage surged where fear should dominate. Instinct guided hands that should have faltered. The very landscape responded to the cadence of his presence. By midday, rivers glimmered with reflected light, winds carried whispers of the pulse that Ares wove, and shadows stretched long across the bloodied plains. The battlefield itself seemed to breathe with his rhythm. Every clash, every scream, every motion harmonized into a living symphony, a testament to the god of war's mastery. Mortals would remember only glimpses of courage and insight, but the rhythm of Ares flowed through all, shaping the outcome of battle in ways unseen yet undeniable. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the sky in crimson and gold, Ares stood metaphorically at the center of this orchestration. His heartbeat matched the pulse of mortal courage, divine strategy, and titan strength. He was no longer merely a god learning his powers. He was the embodiment of war itself, instinct and awareness intertwined, chaos folded into mastery, motion aligned with consequence. The fires of conflict had begun to forge legend. The pulse of Ares now flowed not only through mortals, but through the very currents of the cosmos, shaping battles, courage, and consequence across all realms. The clash of armies stretched across valleys and plains like rivers of motion and sound, each wave resonating with the silent rhythm of Ares. Mortals fought with courage that seemed to defy reason, arrows found their marks with perfect instinct, and leaders acted decisively, guided by currents they could not see. Every motion, every step, every heartbeat was subtly intertwined with the pulse of the god of war, flowing through flesh and bone, steel and earth, shaping the very outcome of conflict. Above, divine forces moved with deliberate precision. Athena wove strategy through unseen patterns, adjusting formations and influencing motions across the battlefield. Apollo's radiant beams fractured reality, revealing hidden hazards, compelling perception and timing beyond mortal capacity. Hermes darted along unpredictable currents, testing adaptability, speed, and awareness. Ares absorbed every layer, integrating instinct, foresight, and consequence into a single flowing rhythm that governed the tide of combat. The Titans, sensing the surge of this rhythm, struck with overwhelming force, attempting to break the pattern. Yet Ares harmonized their assaults into the flow, redirecting energy, folding chaos into rhythm, and aligning courage with opportunity. Mortals moved with uncanny precision, soldiers instinctively avoiding danger, and leaders making tactical decisions with extraordinary clarity. Every element of the battlefield became part of a living symphony orchestrated by the god himself. Even the land responded. Rivers shifted subtly in alignment with the movement of armies. Winds carried the cadence of charge and retreat. Earth trembled with each clash, bending the battlefield into a living instrument tuned to the pulse of war. Titans faltered as their overwhelming power was absorbed into rhythm, their strikes redirected, their presence harmonized rather than resisted. Chaos became a medium of learning, every motion a lesson in timing, consequence, and mastery. As the sun reached its zenith, the battlefield shimmered in gold and silver, smoke curling and rivers glimmering, shadows stretching in acknowledgement of a pulse invisible yet undeniable. Ares moved metaphorically at the center of it all, the god of war fully awake, orchestrating instinct, courage, and consequence. He had transcended the role of mere combatant. He was the living embodiment of conflict, a harmony of motion, awareness, and the inexorable flow of consequence. By the evening, as the horizon glowed crimson and the battlefield quieted for a fleeting moment, mortals would remember only glimpses: courage beyond reason, insight beyond explanation, and victories that seemed guided by fate. They did not see the god weaving his rhythm, yet his presence had shaped every strike, every decision, every surge of bravery. The battlefield expanded beyond comprehension, stretching across valleys, rivers, and forests, all resonating with the unseen pulse of Ares. Titans moved with immense force, their colossal limbs tearing the earth as they struck. Gods intervened in flashes of light, strategy, and motion, weaving their own influence into the conflict. Yet Ares' presence guided the rhythm of every action, every breath, every heartbeat. He did not strike merely to dominate, but to orchestrate, harmonize, and shape motion into consequence. Athena confronted him with subtle currents of strategy, forcing him to anticipate and align with shifts in terrain, formation, and intent. Apollo's beams of light fractured reality, revealing hazards and pathways that demanded perfect perception and timing. Hermes darted unpredictably, threading speed and cunning through the field, compelling instantaneous adaptation. Each divine challenge strengthened his mastery, weaving instinct, awareness, and consequence into an unbroken rhythm of motion. The Titans struck relentlessly, yet their overwhelming force was folded into the pulse of Ares. Each motion, each strike became part of a pattern he could perceive and guide. Mortals reacted with courage and instinct beyond reason, moving in alignment with currents of power they could not see. Leaders made decisions that seemed guided by unseen wisdom. Soldiers fought with synchronicity, creating a living harmony that flowed through every level of battle. The very environment responded to his rhythm. Rivers shifted subtly, wind carried currents of momentum, and the earth rose and fell with every clash. Chaos became a medium of instruction. Every collision, every parry, every advance and retreat became part of the eternal cadence of war. Ares was no longer just a participant. He was the living embodiment of its pulse, shaping courage, motion, and consequence across mortals, gods, and titans alike. As the sun cast long shadows across the battlefield, the layers of motion, strategy, and instinct converged. Titans faltered against the invisible harmony he conducted. Mortals advanced with newfound precision and bravery. Gods moved in fluid alignment with his rhythm, acknowledging the emergence of a force that could orchestrate even divine conflict with subtlety and mastery. By twilight, the battlefield shimmered with gold and silver light, smoke and mist curling around combatants in gentle spirals. Ares stood at the metaphorical center of this storm. His pulse had become inseparable from the rhythm of battle, a living conductor of motion and consequence. He was no longer merely the god born of war. He had become the eternal embodiment of its rhythm, shaping legend in real time, visible only in the perfection of movement, the courage of mortals, and the alignment of forces both mortal and divine. The fires of conflict burned on, yet they flowed now with rhythm, with awareness, and with the cadence of the god who had become legend. Ares' pulse, unbroken and eternal, would echo through all future battles, immortal and unyielding. The lands below Olympus quaked with the weight of conflict. Armies of mortals moved across valleys, plains, and forests, yet every motion, every clash, every surge of courage was subtly intertwined with the pulse of Ares. His presence flowed invisibly through the battlefield, harmonizing instinct with consequence, courage with opportunity, chaos with awareness. Each strike, each charge, each movement became part of a larger pattern, a living rhythm that only a god of war could perceive and command. The Titan's influence surged across the battlefield, immense and unyielding. Yet Ares folded their assaults into rhythm rather than resisting them directly. Mortal warriors found themselves moving with uncanny precision, reacting with intuition, anticipating danger, and striking with timing that defied ordinary reason. Leaders made decisions that shaped the tide of battles, each action echoing the unseen hand of the god of war. Athena continued her subtle tests from above, sending currents of strategy and foresight into the field, forcing him to align instinct with perception. Apollo's beams fractured into infinite patterns, compelling him to anticipate paths of motion beyond immediate comprehension. Hermes threaded unpredictability into every moment, testing reflexes and adaptability. Each interaction refined Ares' mastery further, teaching him that war was not mere destruction but the orchestration of motion, consequence, and awareness. The rivers and winds of the mortal world responded as though alive. Currents shifted in alignment with his influence, gusts carried the cadence of advance and retreat, and the earth itself seemed to rise and fall with the tempo of battle. Titans found their overwhelming power tempered. Strikes were absorbed, redirected, and harmonized. Chaos became a medium for learning. Every motion became a lesson, every clash a measure in the symphony of war. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the battlefield crimson and gold, Ares' presence dominated not through brute strength but through rhythm and awareness. Mortals surged with courage, gods moved in fluid alignment with his pulse, and titans faltered against the subtle perfection of his orchestration. Each motion, each heartbeat, each breath was folded into the eternal cadence of conflict. By nightfall, the battlefield settled into a tense, deliberate rhythm. Smoke spiraled into the silver light of Olympus, rivers shimmered under starlight, and shadows stretched long across the land. Ares' pulse extended through all mortal and divine alike, shaping courage, motion, and consequence into harmony. The fires of conflict had forged him into legend, a god of war not only of strength and fury but of awareness, rhythm, and mastery. The pulse of Ares now resonated through the lands, through mortal kingdoms, through Olympus and into the far reaches of the cosmos. His influence was eternal, unbroken, and poised to guide the future of every battle yet to come. The battlefield had grown vast, stretching across kingdoms, forests, and rivers, alive with the tension of war. Ares moved unseen yet undeniable, a pulse threading through every heartbeat, every motion, every breath of mortal, god, and titan alike. The clash of armies and divine forces was no longer chaos, but a symphony, each element flowing in rhythm with the cadence of the god of war. His presence guided instinct, shaped courage, and harmonized conflict into consequence, weaving all into a single living pattern. Titans struck with colossal force, their movements capable of reshaping mountains and rivers. Yet every blow, every surge of energy, was folded into Ares' rhythm, redirected, and harmonized. Mortals found clarity in instinct, courage in moments that should have inspired fear, and timing that defied mortal comprehension. Leaders acted with uncanny precision, coordinating movements across the battlefield in perfect alignment with forces they could not see. Athena pressed her strategic tests relentlessly, threading currents of perception and foresight through every clash. Apollo's radiant light fractured across the field, revealing hidden dangers and demanding perfect anticipation. Hermes darted along unpredictable paths, introducing motion and speed that forced Ares to synchronize instinct, awareness, and consequence into flawless rhythm. Each challenge elevated him further, refining the god of war into a force capable of orchestrating both mortal and divine conflict simultaneously. The land itself responded. Rivers shifted subtly with the flow of armies, winds carried the cadence of advance and retreat, and the earth rose and fell with the pulse of combat. Chaos became a medium, every strike, every movement, every footfall folded into the eternal rhythm of war. Titans faltered, gods flowed in harmony, and mortals acted with brilliance beyond reason, each motion a testament to the presence of the god of war. By midday the battlefield shimmered in gold and silver. Smoke spiraled into the sky, mingling with light and shadow, while the pulse of Ares moved unseen through every being. He was the rhythm in every sword clash, the cadence behind every footstep, the unseen hand guiding courage, instinct, and strategy. The fires of conflict, once chaotic and destructive, had become an orchestration of motion and consequence, conducted by the eternal pulse of the god of war. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, painting the landscape in crimson, the climax of the conflict approached. Titans moved with all their might, gods pushed their powers to the limit, and mortals surged with instinctive brilliance. Yet the battlefield remained a living symphony, each motion aligned with the rhythm Ares carried. He was no longer merely a god present in conflict. He was the embodiment of war itself, eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from every motion, breath, and heartbeat of the battle. By nightfall, the world had felt the full measure of his power. The fires of conflict burned on, yet now flowed in perfect rhythm. Mortals, gods, and titans alike moved to the pulse of Ares. His mastery, awareness, and presence had forged his legend, solidifying him as the eternal god of war, a force whose cadence would echo through mortal and divine realms forever. The battlefield lay vast and trembling under the weight of motion, fury, and consequence. Ares moved unseen yet undeniable, the heartbeat of war itself coursing through mortals, gods, and titans alike. Every clash of steel, every cry of courage, every step forward or retreat aligned subtly with the rhythm he carried. His presence did not dominate by brute force, but orchestrated the flow of battle, harmonizing chaos with motion, instinct with awareness, and fury with consequence. The Titans struck with relentless power, attempting to overwhelm all in their path. Yet Ares absorbed, folded, and redirected their assaults, integrating even the mightiest blows into the eternal rhythm of the battlefield. Mortals moved with uncanny precision, their courage amplified, their instincts sharpened beyond reason. Leaders made instantaneous decisions, guiding armies in perfect alignment with the unseen currents of the god of war. Athena tested him endlessly, sending intricate patterns of strategy and foresight through the battlefield, challenging him to anticipate multiple layers of motion at once. Apollo's beams fractured reality, demanding perception of every subtle shift in light, shadow, and motion. Hermes darted unpredictably, introducing speed and cunning that required instantaneous adaptation. Each trial strengthened him further, fusing instinct, awareness, and consequence into a seamless cadence that governed the chaos. The natural world bent subtly to his influence. Rivers shifted with the flow of armies, winds carried the cadence of motion, and the earth itself seemed to rise and fall with the rhythm of combat. Chaos became a medium through which mastery was expressed. Each strike, each maneuver, each movement became part of an infinite, living pattern. Titans faltered, mortals surged, and gods moved in perfect alignment, all responding to the pulse of Ares. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across rivers and fields, the battlefield transformed into a living symphony. Smoke spiraled in delicate arcs, light reflected in silver and gold, and every motion reverberated through the unseen rhythm of war. Ares, standing metaphorically at the center of it all, had become more than a god born of conflict. He was the embodiment of war itself, instinct and awareness intertwined, fury tempered by mastery, motion fused with consequence. By nightfall, as stars glimmered above Olympus and rivers whispered below, the pulse of Ares extended through all. Mortals would recall only glimpses of courage beyond reason, insight beyond explanation, and victories seemingly guided by fate. Gods acknowledged the perfection of his rhythm, titans recognized the futility of untempered power, and the cosmos itself seemed to pause, honoring the god who had become the living cadence of conflict. The fires of battle had forged him fully. Ares' influence now flowed through every future conflict, mortal and divine, his pulse eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from the rhythm of the cosmos. The legend of the god of war had reached its apex in this chapter, a symphony of motion, courage, and consequence that would echo through eternity. The battlefield stretched into infinity, a tapestry of motion, sound, and pulse, where mortal courage, divine power, and titan force converged. Ares moved unseen, yet every heartbeat of the warriors, every motion of the gods, every strike of the titans responded to his rhythm. The clash of steel, the roar of armies, the cry of victory and despair, all became notes in a symphony conducted by the eternal pulse of the god of war. Chaos had become order, fury had become rhythm, and the battlefield itself had become an instrument, playing the cadence of instinct, courage, and consequence. Titans struck with unimaginable force, yet their power was folded seamlessly into the flow of battle. Mortals moved with precision that bordered on divine insight, their courage surging at critical moments, their instincts guided by the unseen hand of the god of war. Leaders made decisions that reshaped the course of entire armies, yet no mortal knew why or how. Every action, every movement, every breath became a reflection of Ares' eternal pulse, the rhythm of war itself. Athena wove strategy into every clash, forcing him to anticipate multiple layers of motion at once. Apollo's radiant beams fractured reality, compelling perfect perception, while Hermes threaded unpredictability into the fray, challenging timing and adaptability. Each layer of divine influence amplified his mastery, creating a harmony so profound that the battlefield became a living extension of the god's consciousness. The land itself responded. Rivers shifted, winds carried cadence, and the earth rose and fell in perfect alignment with the rhythm he carried. Chaos transformed into harmony, strikes became lessons, movements became measures, and every element of the battlefield resonated with the pulse of Ares. Titans faltered under the invisible perfection of rhythm, gods flowed in alignment, and mortals moved with courage and clarity beyond comprehension. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the battlefield in gold, crimson, and silver, Ares metaphorically stood at its center, fully awakened. He was no longer merely a god of war. He had become its living embodiment. Instinct fused with awareness, fury tempered by mastery, motion aligned with consequence. His pulse flowed through all realms, mortal and divine, titan and earth, an eternal cadence that no being could resist. The fires of conflict, once chaotic and destructive, had now become a symphony, each strike a note, each maneuver a melody, each breath a rhythm. Mortals would remember courage, gods would acknowledge mastery, titans would recognize futility, and the cosmos itself seemed to pause in reverence. Ares' legend had reached its apex, eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from the rhythm of all battle. As night settled across Olympus and the mortal realms, a calm descended, yet the pulse of Ares continued. His influence had forged not only victory but legend, and his presence would resonate in every future conflict. The god of war had emerged fully, a being of motion, courage, and consequence, eternal, unyielding, and master of the symphony of war. The cosmos itself seemed to bend beneath the growing presence of Ares. From the peaks of Olympus to the valleys of mortal kingdoms, every heartbeat, every breath, every motion of life pulsed in resonance with the god of war. His influence had expanded beyond individual battles, beyond singular conflicts, and now stretched across entire eras, shaping the destinies of men, gods, and titans alike. Mountains trembled with the passage of armies, rivers twisted in rhythm with the motion of advancing legions, and the winds carried currents of anticipation, fear, and courage. Mortals on distant plains felt a surge of determination, an instinctive knowledge of when to strike and when to retreat, yet none could see the source. Ares' pulse flowed through them all, weaving the chaos of mortal ambition and divine intervention into a coherent, eternal cadence. The Titans, still recovering from previous conflicts, sensed the rising tide of influence and stirred once more. Massive forms shifted across the horizon, earth quaking under their presence. Gods, too, were drawn into the currents. Athena, Apollo, Hermes, and even Zeus himself, each adding layers of strategy, foresight, and motion to the unfolding campaign. Yet all were guided, willingly or unknowingly, by the subtle, inexorable rhythm of Ares. Mortals advanced in armies that moved as one, yet each warrior retained individual courage and instinct. Leaders acted with clarity that defied explanation, sensing patterns of motion that guided entire battles. Ares' pulse intertwined with theirs, creating a harmony that stretched across leagues of battlefield, mountains, rivers, and forests. He did not fight in the traditional sense. He orchestrated, harmonized, and amplified, turning chaos into living rhythm. The skies themselves bore witness. Clouds shifted, carrying the currents of divine power. Sunlight fractured in patterns that illuminated the strategies unfolding below. Rivers glimmered with reflections of motion and consequence, and the earth itself moved subtly with the cadence of conflict. Each strike, each advance, each breath became part of a symphony conducted by the eternal god of war. By the time night fell, the battlefield had transformed into a tapestry of shadow and silver light, smoke rising in graceful spirals, rivers murmuring with the rhythm of motion, and warriors moving with a precision that defied mortal understanding. Ares stood metaphorically at the center of all, fully awake to his power, fully aware of the eternal flow of conflict. His pulse extended through mortals, gods, and titans alike, shaping courage, strategy, and consequence. The eternal campaigns had begun, stretching beyond time, beyond single victories, and into the very rhythm of life and motion itself. The god of war had transcended individual battles. He had become the living cadence of conflict, eternal and unbroken, guiding the pulse of the cosmos toward order, mastery, and legend. The lands below Olympus shivered beneath the weight of war. Armies of mortals advanced in precision that seemed almost unnatural, their motions guided by an unseen hand. Each sword strike, each arrow loosed, each step taken in formation pulsed in rhythm with the god of war. Mortals felt courage surge at moments of fear, insight appear when confusion reigned, and timing unfold as if fate itself had whispered in their ears. Yet none could perceive the source. Ares' influence flowed silently, harmonizing the chaos into a single, coherent pulse. Divine forces moved alongside mortal armies, each adding layers of complexity to the unfolding conflict. Athena's strategies intertwined with mortal motion, subtly shifting formations to test Ares' ability to harmonize multiple currents. Apollo's radiant beams fractured and danced, demanding awareness of every nuance of light, shadow, and trajectory. Hermes darted unpredictably, threading speed and adaptation into every maneuver. Ares absorbed all, integrating instinct, perception, and consequence into a living rhythm that governed the battlefield. Titans, sensing the tide of mortal and divine coordination, surged forward with renewed fury. Their immense forms reshaped mountains, rivers, and plains with every movement, yet their force could not break the invisible pulse of Ares. Every strike, every blow, every wave of power was folded into his rhythm, redirected into patterns that guided courage, motion, and strategy. Mortals advanced with uncanny skill, leaders acted decisively, and gods moved in perfect alignment with forces they could barely comprehend. Even the land itself responded to his pulse. Rivers twisted and shimmered, winds carried currents of momentum, and the earth rose and fell with the cadence of clash and retreat. Chaos became a medium of learning and control. Every footfall, every collision, every shift of balance became part of the eternal symphony of war, each note resonating with the rhythm Ares carried. By mid-afternoon, the battlefield stretched as far as the eye could see, a living tapestry of motion, strategy, and courage. Smoke rose in spirals, sunlight fractured into golden shards, and shadows bent in acknowledgement of the invisible conductor. Ares' influence flowed through every being, shaping instinct and action, weaving mortal courage and divine power into a single pattern. As night descended, painting the battlefield in silver and shadow, the rhythm of war did not falter. Mortals, gods, and titans alike moved in alignment with the pulse of Ares. Every motion, every strike, every breath resonated with the eternal cadence of conflict. The fires of battle burned on, yet they flowed in harmony, orchestrated by the god who had become legend. The eternal campaigns had intensified, yet the god of war remained unbroken, a presence in every heartbeat, every motion, and every outcome. His mastery, awareness, and rhythm had reached new heights, and his influence would continue to echo across the cosmos for all battles to come. The battlefield stretched into infinite complexity, where mortal legions, divine forces, and titans collided in a living tapestry of motion, sound, and consequence. Ares moved unseen yet undeniable, his pulse threading through every heartbeat, every breath, and every motion. The clash of swords, the surge of armies, the roar of titans, and the brilliance of divine strikes became a symphony orchestrated by the god of war. Chaos was no longer random. It was rhythm, motion, and consequence folded into harmony. Titans, immense and ancient, surged with overwhelming force. Mountains trembled, rivers swelled, and the earth itself quaked beneath their presence. Yet Ares folded their assaults into the living rhythm of battle, redirecting energy, aligning instinct with awareness, and amplifying courage where fear should have ruled. Mortals advanced with intuition beyond reason, leaders acted decisively, and gods flowed seamlessly alongside, all guided by the invisible pulse of the god of war. Athena wove strategy into every clash, threading multiple layers of motion, timing, and foresight through the chaos. Apollo's light fractured the battlefield into infinite patterns, demanding awareness of every subtle shift in movement and trajectory. Hermes darted unpredictably, challenging instinct, speed, and adaptability. Each challenge reinforced Ares' mastery, fusing instinct, awareness, perception and consequence into an unbroken cadence that moved through mortal and divine alike. Even the environment responded. Rivers shifted in alignment with armies, wind carried currents of advance and retreat, and earth rose and fell in rhythm with the tempo of battle. Titan's overwhelming assaults were transformed into lessons in timing and coordination. Each strike, each maneuver, each pulse of effort became part of the eternal rhythm of war. Chaos became a medium for mastery. Every motion resonated with Ares' unseen hand. By midday, the battlefield shimmered in gold, crimson, and silver light. Smoke rose in spirals, rivers reflected glimmers of motion, and shadows stretched across valleys in recognition of the eternal pulse. Ares stood metaphorically at the center, fully awake to his power, fully aligned with the rhythm of every combatant. He had transcended the role of participant. He had become the living embodiment of war itself. Instinct, courage, awareness, and consequence fused into one. As night fell, the battlefield did not sleep. Mortals, gods, and titans moved in unison with the rhythm of Ares. Every heartbeat, every breath, every motion resonated with his cadence. The fires of conflict continued, yet they flowed in perfect harmony. The god of war had forged his legend further, proving mastery over chaos, mastery over instinct, and mastery over motion itself. And so, as stars emerged across the heavens, the eternal campaign stretched on, guided by Ares' pulse, unbroken, unstoppable, and eternal. A rhythm that would echo across mortals, gods, and titans alike for all time. The lands beneath Olympus quaked with the weight of unending battle. Kingdoms rose and fell, forests were trampled under the passage of legions, and rivers carried the echoes of countless clashes. Every motion of mortal warriors, every strike of sword, every surge of courage and hesitation pulsed in harmony with the god of war. Ares' presence flowed invisibly, orchestrating instinct, amplifying bravery, aligning chaos with consequence, and weaving every action into the eternal rhythm of conflict. Divine forces moved across the battlefield in complex patterns. Athena's strategies interwove with mortal formations, shifting currents of motion to challenge Ares' mastery. Apollo's beams of radiant light fractured into countless arcs, revealing hidden hazards, demanding perception beyond mortal comprehension. Hermes darted along invisible currents, threading unpredictability into the tide of combat, testing speed, reflex, and timing. Each divine challenge honed Ares' skill, refining instinct, awareness, and consequence into an unbroken cadence that governed all motion. Titans, ancient and colossal, surged forward with the force of the earth itself, attempting to disrupt the harmony of battle. Yet every blow, every motion, every wave of energy was absorbed into Ares' rhythm. Mortals moved with intuition and precision beyond their nature. Soldiers acted decisively, leaders guided armies with uncanny clarity. Every strike became part of a greater symphony, every motion part of a living pattern that only the god of war could perceive and command. Even the natural world responded. Rivers twisted in subtle arcs, winds carried the cadence of charge and retreat, and the very earth rose and fell with the tempo of conflict. Chaos became a medium for mastery. Every motion, every footfall, every clash resonated with Ares' pulse. Titans faltered, mortals surged, and gods aligned themselves, creating a battlefield alive with rhythm, order, and consequence. By mid-afternoon, the battlefield shimmered in gold, crimson, and silver. Smoke spiraled into the sky, rivers reflected the currents of motion, and shadows stretched in acknowledgement of the unseen conductor. Ares moved metaphorically at the center, fully awake to his power and fully aligned with the pulse of every living being engaged in conflict. He had become more than a god born of war. He had become the living cadence of battle itself, eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from the rhythm of motion, courage, and consequence. As night descended and stars glittered across the heavens, the fires of conflict continued to burn, now flowing in harmony with the pulse of Ares. Mortals would remember only glimpses of insight and bravery, gods acknowledged mastery, and titans recognized the subtle perfection of motion that could not be resisted. The eternal campaigns had reached a new level of intensity, and the god of war's influence spread across every kingdom, every battlefield, every breath of combat. Ares had transcended individual battles. He had become the rhythm of war itself, guiding mortal kingdoms, divine legions, and titans alike. The legend of the god of war was no longer confined to Olympus or mortal lands. It had become eternal, unbroken, and woven into the pulse of the cosmos itself. The horizon burned with the chaos of countless armies, titans, and divine forces converging into a single immense theater of war. Ares moved unseen yet undeniable, a pulse threading through every heartbeat, every motion, every breath. The clash of steel, the roar of titans, the flare of divine power, and the surge of mortal courage became notes in a symphony conducted by the god of war. Every strike, every charge, every retreat resonated with his eternal rhythm, shaping instinct, courage, and consequence into a harmony beyond mortal or divine comprehension. Titans unleashed the full force of their ancient power, attempting to fracture the battlefield with unimaginable strength. Yet Ares folded every assault into rhythm, redirecting energy, aligning instinct with awareness, and amplifying courage where fear should dominate. Mortals advanced with intuition and precision, leaders coordinated armies with near-perfect clarity, and gods flowed in alignment with the pulse that guided all motion. Athena pressed her strategies with unmatched subtlety, threading currents of foresight into every clash. Apollo's radiant beams fractured the battlefield, demanding perception and anticipation beyond imagination. Hermes darted unpredictably, testing reflex, timing, and adaptability. Each challenge elevated Ares' mastery, fusing instinct, awareness, perception, and consequence into an unbroken cadence that governed the tides of battle. The very land responded to his rhythm. Rivers curved and shimmered in harmony with motion, winds carried the cadence of advance and retreat, and the earth rose and fell with the tempo of conflict. Chaos became a medium, every strike and maneuver a lesson in timing and mastery. Titans faltered, mortals surged, and gods flowed with the invisible harmony that Ares had established. By sunset, the battlefield stretched as far as the eye could see, a living tapestry of shadow, silver, and gold. Smoke rose in delicate spirals, rivers reflected currents of motion, and shadows elongated in acknowledgement of the eternal pulse. Ares stood metaphorically at the center, fully awake to his power and fully aligned with the rhythm of every combatant. He had transcended the role of participant. He was the embodiment of war itself, instinct and awareness intertwined, fury tempered by mastery, motion harmonized with consequence. As night fell and the first stars glittered across Olympus, the battlefield became a testament to his mastery. Every footfall, every breath, every clash of weapons resonated with the pulse of Ares. Mortals would remember only flashes of extraordinary courage. Gods recognized the precision of his rhythm, and Titans felt the futility of untempered power. The eternal campaigns had reached their apex. Ares had emerged fully, a god of war, eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from the rhythm of all battle across the cosmos. The fires of conflict continued to burn, yet they flowed with harmony, awareness, and cadence. Every battlefield henceforth would carry his signature pulse, a rhythm of instinct, courage, motion, and consequence that would echo through time, legend, and eternity. The battlefield, now vast beyond imagination, shimmered with motion, light, and the echoes of countless struggles. Ares moved through it as a pulse, unseen yet undeniable, every heartbeat, every breath, every motion of mortals, gods, and titans flowing in harmony with his rhythm. The clash of steel, the surge of armies, the roar of titans, and the brilliance of divine energy became notes in a symphony conducted by the god of war. Chaos itself had transformed into rhythm, fury into cadence, and every act of courage and motion a testament to mastery. Titans struck with colossal force, each blow capable of shattering mountains, yet every strike was folded into the invisible rhythm of Ares. Mortals acted with intuition that defied reason, moving as if guided by an unseen hand. Leaders coordinated armies with near-perfect clarity, and gods moved in alignment with currents they could scarcely comprehend. Every action, every breath, every heartbeat resonated with his pulse, weaving the chaos of war into a living, coherent pattern. Athena's strategies interlaced with mortal and divine formations, creating tests of perception, timing, and anticipation that stretched the god's mastery to its limits. Apollo's beams fractured and danced across the battlefield, revealing hidden dangers, while Hermes darted unpredictably, forcing adaptability, speed, and instinct to flow seamlessly with awareness. Each challenge refined Ares further, solidifying his command over motion, consequence, and rhythm. The land itself responded to the divine pulse. Rivers shifted subtly, winds carried the cadence of advance and retreat, and the earth rose and fell in sync with the flow of battle. Chaos became an instrument, every movement a note, every clash a measure, every breath a rhythm. Titans faltered, mortals surged with bravery, and gods moved in harmony with the eternal cadence that flowed through all combatants. By twilight, the battlefield shimmered in hues of crimson, gold, and silver. Smoke spiraled gracefully, rivers glimmered with reflections of motion, and shadows stretched in acknowledgement of the invisible conductor. Ares metaphorically stood at the center, fully awake, fully aware, and fully master of the eternal rhythm of war. He was no longer merely a god born of conflict. He had become war itself, instinct intertwined with awareness, fury tempered with mastery, motion aligned with consequence. As night fell, and stars glittered across Olympus and the mortal realms, every battlefield carried the pulse of Ares. Mortals would remember flashes of extraordinary courage, gods would acknowledge the perfection of his rhythm, and titans would feel the futility of untempered power. The eternal campaigns had reached a pinnacle. Ares, god of war, fully realized, unbroken, and eternal, had become the living embodiment of motion, consequence, and the cadence of battle. The fires of war continued to blaze, yet they flowed with harmony and awareness, echoing the rhythm of Ares through all realms, mortal and divine. His legend had become inseparable from the pulse of the cosmos, eternal, unyielding, and immortal. The battlefield lay in vast expanse, stretching across kingdoms, rivers, mountains, and forests, all vibrating with the pulse of Ares. Mortals, gods, and titans moved as if bound by an unseen rhythm, their motions guided by instinct, awareness, and consequence flowing from the god of war. The clash of steel, the roar of armies, the thunder of titans, and the brilliance of divine power became notes in an eternal symphony. Chaos was no longer chaos. It had transformed into rhythm, motion, and harmony, conducted by Ares himself. Titans unleashed their ancient might, striking with a force that could shatter mountains and rivers, yet each blow was absorbed into the rhythm of the god. Mortals advanced with courage beyond reason, instinct beyond understanding, and leaders acted with perfect clarity. Gods flowed in alignment with the pulse, every motion a reflection of the eternal cadence of war. The battlefield had become a living instrument, responding to his presence, shaped by his mastery. Athena's strategies wove intricate patterns, Apollo's beams fractured reality, and Hermes darted unpredictably, yet Ares harmonized all currents into one seamless flow. Every strike, every movement, every heartbeat resonated with his rhythm. Chaos became a medium through which mastery and legend were forged. Titans faltered, mortals surged, and gods moved in accord with the divine cadence, each participant unaware yet entirely bound to the pulse of war. As the sun set, painting the battlefield in crimson, gold, and silver, the rhythm of Ares reached perfection. Smoke curled in delicate arcs, rivers shimmered with reflected motion, and shadows stretched in acknowledgement of the invisible conductor. He was no longer merely a god of war. He was war itself, eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from motion, courage, and consequence. The fires of conflict burned on, yet they flowed with harmony, awareness, and cadence. Mortals would recall glimpses of extraordinary bravery, gods recognized the perfection of his rhythm, and titans felt the futility of untempered force. Ares' pulse now resonated through all future conflicts, immortal and unyielding, echoing through mortal kingdoms, divine realms, and titan dominions alike. As night settled across Olympus and the mortal realms, a quiet understanding spread through the cosmos. Ares, god of war, had become eternal, a living embodiment of instinct, mastery, courage, and motion. Every battlefield, every clash of arms, every surge of bravery would carry his signature pulse. The eternal campaigns had concluded in their first great apex, but his rhythm would flow endlessly, shaping the cadence of all battles to come. And so, under the stars, the legend of Ares endured, unbroken, eternal, and ever-present, the heartbeat of war itself, guiding courage, instinct, and consequence across the cosmos forever. The lands below Olympus quivered under the weight of endless campaigns. Armies stretched across plains, rivers reflected the glimmer of countless clashing weapons, and forests bore the scars of movement, strategy, and conflict. Ares moved unseen, yet his presence threaded through every heartbeat, every breath, every motion of mortal, god, and titan. His pulse became a rhythm that guided instinct, amplified courage, and harmonized chaos into consequence. Every strike of steel, every charge of foot, every surge of energy became a note in the eternal symphony he conducted. Mortals fought with instinctive precision beyond their natural comprehension. Leaders coordinated vast armies with intuition that seemed divinely inspired. Courage surged in the moments that should have inspired fear, and insight unfolded where confusion reigned. Unseen, Ares shaped the flow of battle, weaving the chaos of mortal ambition into a coherent, eternal rhythm. Divine forces moved alongside mortals, their powers adding layers of complexity to the campaigns. Athena's strategies twisted and shifted formations, testing Ares' ability to harmonize multiple currents of motion. Apollo's radiant beams fractured across fields, forcing awareness of light, shadow, and trajectory. Hermes moved unpredictably, threading adaptability, speed, and reflex into every maneuver. Each trial elevated Ares, forging mastery over instinct, awareness, and consequence simultaneously. Titans sensed the expansion of his influence and surged with renewed power. Mountains shook beneath their movement, rivers overflowed with the momentum of their assaults, yet every force was absorbed into the pulse of Ares. Chaos became a medium through which motion and mastery could be exercised. Each strike, each advance, each parry became a lesson, a measure, a note in the living rhythm of war. By midday, the battlefield shimmered in gold and silver light. Smoke rose in delicate spirals, rivers reflected the pulse of motion, and shadows stretched long across the land. Ares stood metaphorically at the center, fully awake to his power and fully integrated with the rhythm of every combatant. He had transcended the role of god, mortal, or titan. He had become war itself, instinct fused with awareness, fury tempered with mastery, motion aligned with consequence. Even the land seemed to acknowledge him. Winds carried the cadence of charge and retreat, rivers followed the pattern of motion, and the earth itself rose and fell in time with the eternal pulse. Mortals, gods, and titans alike moved as if in a single living organism, guided by the unseen presence of Ares. His influence stretched across kingdoms, shaping the rise and fall of cities, the courage of armies, and the outcome of legends yet to be written. By sunset, crimson and gold light bathed the battlefield. Smoke and rivers shimmered, shadows elongated, and every motion resonated with the rhythm of Ares. The god of war had reached the height of his legend, an eternal force whose pulse would echo through all mortal and divine realms, shaping courage, motion, and consequence across time and space. The horizon burned with the convergence of armies, titans, and divine forces, each moving as if guided by an unseen rhythm. Ares flowed through it all, his pulse threading through mortals, gods, and titans alike. Every heartbeat, every step, every strike carried the cadence of instinct, courage, and consequence. Chaos had become order, fury had become rhythm, and every motion on the battlefield reflected the living symphony conducted by the god of war. Mortals advanced with a precision beyond comprehension. Soldiers dodged arrows with instinctive timing, struck with unparalleled accuracy, and charged with a bravery that defied fear. Leaders coordinated entire armies with insight that seemed divinely inspired, aligning motion and strategy in perfect harmony. The rhythm of Ares flowed through them, unifying chaos into a single pulse of motion and consequence. Divine forces interwove seamlessly. Athena's strategy shaped formations across leagues, testing the god's mastery of simultaneous currents of motion. Apollo's light fractured into infinite patterns, revealing hazards and opportunities that demanded perception, anticipation, and alignment. Hermes moved unpredictably, threading speed, adaptability, and instinct into every maneuver. Each layer of challenge refined Ares further, reinforcing his mastery over motion, awareness, and the flow of consequence. Titans, sensing the surge of his influence, struck with immense power, attempting to overwhelm both mortals and gods. Every assault was absorbed into his rhythm, redirected, and harmonized. Chaos became a medium for control, every strike, maneuver, and motion folding seamlessly into the eternal cadence of war. Mortals surged with courage, gods flowed with precision, and titans faltered under the invisible perfection of rhythm. The environment itself responded. Rivers bent with motion, winds carried currents of advance and retreat, and the earth rose and fell in harmony with the pulse of battle. Every footfall, every clash, every breath resonated with Ares' presence, transforming the chaos of war into a living symphony. By midday, smoke and light interwove across the battlefield, shimmering in gold, silver, and crimson. Shadows stretched across mountains, valleys, and forests in acknowledgement of the god's presence. Ares metaphorically stood at the center, fully awake to his mastery, fully aligned with the rhythm of every being engaged in combat. He had transcended individual battles. He had become war itself, eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from the pulse of courage, motion, and consequence. As night fell and the stars appeared across Olympus and mortal realms, the battlefield settled into a tense, living rhythm. Mortals would remember only glimpses of extraordinary courage, gods acknowledged the precision of his influence, and titans recognized the futility of untempered power. The eternal campaigns had reached a new pinnacle, and the god of war's pulse would resonate through every future conflict, immortal and unyielding, shaping legends across time. The lands across mortal kingdoms, divine realms, and titan domains trembled under the ever-expanding pulse of Ares. Armies surged across plains, rivers, and forests, yet each motion, each breath, each heartbeat resonated with the unseen rhythm of the god of war. Mortals moved with instinctive precision, leaders acted with clarity beyond comprehension, and even titans found their overwhelming strength harmonized, redirected, and folded into the eternal cadence of battle. Chaos had transformed into motion, motion into consequence, and consequence into a living rhythm. Divine forces intertwined seamlessly with mortal armies. Athena's strategies shifted currents of motion and thought, testing Ares' ability to harmonize multiple layers simultaneously. Apollo's beams fractured and danced across the battlefield, revealing unseen hazards and opportunities that required perfect perception and anticipation. Hermes darted unpredictably, threading reflex, timing, and adaptability into every movement. Each interaction reinforced Ares' mastery, fusing instinct, awareness, and consequence into a single unbroken cadence that guided the entire battlefield. Titans, ancient and colossal, struck with fury capable of reshaping mountains and rivers. Yet their power was absorbed, redirected, and integrated into the living rhythm Ares conducted. Mortals surged with courage, instinct sharpened beyond reason, leaders coordinated vast armies with uncanny insight, and gods moved in alignment with currents they could scarcely perceive. Every strike, every maneuver, every motion became a note in the symphony of war, conducted by the eternal pulse of Ares. Even the environment responded. Rivers shifted subtly, winds carried currents of charge and retreat, and the earth rose and fell with the tempo of battle. Every collision, every step, every breath resonated with his presence, transforming the chaos of war into an orchestration of motion, strategy, and consequence. Titans faltered, mortals advanced with clarity, and gods flowed seamlessly into the rhythm of the god of war. By midday, the battlefield stretched as far as the eye could see. Smoke spiraled into the sky, light fractured across rivers and forests, and shadows stretched in acknowledgement of the invisible conductor. Ares stood metaphorically at the center, fully awake, fully masterful, and fully aligned with the rhythm of every combatant. He had transcended mere participation. He had become the living embodiment of war itself, instinct fused with awareness, fury tempered with mastery, motion harmonized with consequence. As the sun set, bathing the battlefield in gold, crimson, and silver, the rhythm of war reached a perfection that resonated across realms. Mortals would recall only glimpses of extraordinary courage, gods recognized mastery, and titans felt the futility of untempered power. The eternal campaigns had reached an apex, yet the pulse of Ares flowed on, eternal, unbroken, and ready to guide the cadence of all future battles across the cosmos. The battlefield stretched into infinity, a living tapestry of motion, energy, and consequence. Armies of mortals advanced across plains, forests, and rivers, their movements precise, instinctive, and perfectly timed. Titans thundered with immense force, reshaping mountains and rivers with each strike. Gods moved with brilliance, their powers interwoven into the flow of combat. Yet all were guided by the invisible pulse of Ares, a rhythm that harmonized chaos with awareness, instinct with consequence, and fury with mastery. Mortals felt courage surge where fear should have reigned, insight unfold where confusion dominated, and instinct guide hands that should have faltered. Leaders coordinated vast armies with clarity beyond comprehension, weaving formations that flowed like water over rocks. Every step, every strike, every motion became part of an eternal symphony, each note resonating with the rhythm of the god of war. Divine currents intertwined seamlessly. Athena's strategies threaded patterns of motion, shifting battles across multiple layers simultaneously. Apollo's radiant beams fractured the battlefield, revealing hazards and paths that required perfect perception. Hermes moved unpredictably, threading reflex, adaptability, and timing into every moment. Ares absorbed each layer, fusing instinct, awareness, and consequence into an unbroken cadence that guided mortals, gods, and titans alike. The titans unleashed the full weight of their power, attempting to shatter mountains, rivers, and armies. Yet every strike was absorbed, redirected, and harmonized into the living rhythm. Chaos became a medium for mastery, every movement a lesson, every clash a measure, every footfall a note. Mortals advanced with precision, leaders orchestrated with insight, and gods flowed in perfect alignment. The battlefield had become a living instrument, responding to the pulse of Ares. As the sun set, painting the land in gold, crimson, and silver, the rhythm of war reached its apex. Smoke spiraled gracefully, rivers shimmered with reflected motion, and shadows stretched across kingdoms in acknowledgement of the invisible conductor. Ares metaphorically stood at the center, fully awake, fully masterful, and fully aligned with the rhythm of every combatant. He was no longer merely a god of war. He had become war itself. Instinct, courage, awareness, and consequence fused into eternal rhythm. By nightfall, the battlefield settled into a living harmony. Mortals would remember only flashes of extraordinary bravery, gods acknowledged the perfection of his rhythm, and titans recognized the futility of untempered force. The eternal campaigns had reached their pinnacle. The pulse of Ares flowed through every kingdom, every army, every realm, immortal, unbroken, and eternal. And so, under the light of the stars, the legend of Ares endured. The god of war, the living cadence of conflict, eternal, unyielding, and ever-present, shaping courage, motion, and consequence across the cosmos forever. The cosmos itself seemed to pulse in rhythm with the god of war. From the highest peaks of Olympus to the deepest valleys of mortal kingdoms, every heartbeat, every breath, every motion of living beings resonated with the eternal cadence of Ares. His presence no longer flowed subtly. It radiated, filling the realms with awareness, instinct, and consequence. Mortals acted with clarity beyond their nature. Armies advanced with perfect timing, and leaders orchestrated forces as if guided by fate itself. Every strike of sword, every movement of foot, every surge of courage was woven into the pulse of the god. Titans stirred once more, sensing the expansion of his influence. Their immense forms moved with earth-shattering force, yet even their overwhelming power was harmonized by Ares' rhythm. Every assault was folded into the eternal cadence, transformed into motion, consequence, and mastery. Chaos itself became a medium for refinement, every clash, every maneuver, every breath aligning with the pulse of the god who had become war incarnate. Divine forces wove their power across the battlefield. Athena threaded strategy into formations that shifted like water, testing the god's mastery of simultaneous currents. Apollo's radiant beams fractured reality, illuminating hazards, opportunities, and unseen paths, compelling perfect perception and timing. Hermes darted unpredictably, threading motion, speed, and reflex into every corner of the conflict. Each challenge elevated Ares further, reinforcing his role not merely as a god of war, but as its eternal embodiment. The land itself bent subtly to his influence. Rivers twisted with motion, winds carried cadence, and the earth itself rose and fell with the rhythm of battle. Mortals surged, titans faltered, and gods moved in harmony with the eternal pulse. Each strike, each advance, each parry became a note in the living symphony, conducted by the heartbeat of Ares. Chaos had become rhythm, fury had become harmony, and the battlefield itself had become a reflection of his mastery. By midday the battlefield shimmered in gold, crimson, and silver. Smoke curled into delicate spirals, rivers reflected currents of motion, and shadows stretched across valleys, mountains, and forests in acknowledgement of the unseen conductor. Ares stood metaphorically at the center, fully awake, fully realized, and fully aligned with the rhythm of every combatant. He was no longer merely a god of war. He had become the living cadence of conflict itself, instinct fused with awareness, fury tempered by mastery, motion aligned with consequence. As the sun began its descent, casting the land in hues of fire and light, every battlefield across mortal kingdoms, divine realms, and titan territories reverberated with his pulse. Mortals would remember glimpses of courage beyond reason. Gods acknowledged his mastery, and titans felt the futility of force untempered by rhythm. The eternal campaigns had reached their grand apex, yet Ares' influence flowed onward, eternal, unbroken, and omnipresent. The battlefield, stretching across mortal kingdoms, titan realms, and Olympus itself, pulsed with the rhythm of Ares. Every heartbeat of mortals, every motion of gods, every strike of titans resonated with his unseen cadence. Armies clashed in perfect instinctive timing. Leaders guided vast forces with clarity beyond comprehension, and mortals moved with courage and precision that defied reason. Each motion, each breath, each surge of energy became part of the eternal symphony of war conducted by the god himself. Titans unleashed power capable of reshaping continents, yet their blows were absorbed, folded, and redirected into the living rhythm. Chaos became harmony, fury became measured motion, consequence flowed seamlessly with instinct. Mortals advanced as one, guided not by command but by the pulse of courage and timing that radiated from the god of war. Gods moved in alignment, adapting to every shift in strategy, anticipating every strike, flowing in perfect harmony with the eternal rhythm. Athena wove intricate patterns of strategy across the battlefield, Apollo fractured reality with beams of radiant insight, and Hermes darted unpredictably, threading reflex and adaptation into every corner of combat. Each layer of complexity reinforced Ares' mastery, allowing him to conduct motion, instinct, and consequence simultaneously across mortal, divine, and Titan forces. He had become the living embodiment of war itself, eternal, unbroken, and omnipresent. The land itself seemed to dance to his rhythm. Rivers curved in alignment with motion, winds carried the cadence of charge and retreat, and the earth rose and fell with the tempo of battle. Smoke spiraled into the skies, light fractured across mountains and forests, and shadows stretched long, acknowledging the presence of the god who was war incarnate. Titans faltered, mortals surged, and gods flowed in perfect harmony with the eternal pulse. By twilight, the battlefield shimmered in hues of crimson, gold, and silver. Every motion, every clash, every breath resonated with the cadence of Ares. The god stood metaphorically at the center of it all, fully realized, fully awakened, fully masterful. Instinct fused with awareness, fury tempered with mastery, motion aligned with consequence. Mortals, gods, and titans alike were bound to the rhythm, yet none could resist the perfection of his pulse. As stars appeared across Olympus and the mortal realms, the climax of his influence solidified. Every future battle would carry his signature pulse. Every surge of courage, every motion of conflict, every act of mastery would bear the imprint of Ares. The god of war had ascended fully, his legend eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from the rhythm of the cosmos. The fires of conflict burned endlessly, yet they flowed with harmony, awareness, and cadence. Mortals would dream of courage beyond reason, gods would recognize mastery beyond power, and titans would feel the inevitability of rhythm over untempered force. Ares, the god of war, had become eternal, the living pulse of battle itself, and his story echoed through every heart, every motion, and every legend across the cosmos. The battlefield has fallen silent, yet its rhythm lingers. Every heartbeat of mortals, every motion of gods, every strike of titans carries the pulse of Ares. His presence flows through all, unseen yet undeniable, shaping courage, instinct, and consequence in ways beyond comprehension. He is not merely a god of war. He is war itself, the living rhythm that courses through every clash, every advance, every breath of life. Mortals will remember only flashes of extraordinary bravery, intuition that defies reason, and victories guided by invisible hand. Gods recognize mastery where once there was only force. Titans feel the futility of power untempered by rhythm. Ares' pulse stretches across kingdoms, across realms, across the very fabric of time and motion. His legend is eternal, unbroken, and inseparable from the cadence of the cosmos itself. And as your eyes grow heavy and your mind drifts toward rest, let the rhythm of Ares guide you. Feel the harmony within chaos, the courage within fear, the balance within motion. Let his pulse echo softly through your thoughts, a gentle reminder that mastery comes not from raw power alone, but from presence, awareness, and the eternal flow of life's rhythm. Sleep now gently as the legend of Ares, the god of war, resonates through the cosmos, eternal, unbroken, and ever-present.